Faye Pennington had never been inside a place that smelled like eucalyptus and cost more than her rent until today. She stood in the marble reception area of the Ilaria Wellness Spa. Glancing down at the brochure, she was still gripping like a lifeline. One Serenity package, it read, booked through a surprise gift voucher from her coworkers. Honestly, she thought it was a prank at first. But there she was surrounded by soft music, flickering candles, and a woman in all white smiling at her with the kind of calm that made Faye feel like she was yelling just by existing. "This way, Miss Pennington," the spa hostess said, motioning toward a hallway of private treatment rooms. Faye followed, still not sure how she'd ended up here. She worked reception at a busy dental office, constantly on her feet, constantly dealing with patients who hated being there. Her coworkers swore she needed to relax before she exploded, and maybe they were right. She stepped into the treatment room and stopped short. There was a man inside, a man, shirtless. Sitting on the massage table like he belonged there, he looked up from a glass of cucumber water, clearly just as surprised to see her. She began. "Are you my masseuse?" he asked, one eyebrow raised. Faye nearly choked on her own breath. "No, I'm definitely not. I was told this was my room." The door behind her creaked open again. The spa hostess popped her head in, eyes wide. "Oh no, I am so sorry, there's been a mix-up." This was supposed to be a couple's treatment for two clients with the same last name. Please give me one moment." Faye blinked. "Wait, couple's treatment?" The man stood now, towering and athletic, his chest an unfair distraction. "Well, I'm single," he said, crossing his arms. "So unless you're secretly my fiancé, I think someone made a mistake." Faye almost laughed. "Definitely not your fiancé." The spa hostess rushed back in. "We're fully booked today, but if you're both comfortable, we could still honor the session as scheduled. It's a shared massage room, but everything else will be completely professional. Complimentary, of course." Faye hesitated. It wasn't like she could afford to come back. And this man, while absurdly attractive, didn't seem like the type to try anything weird. He looked more annoyed than anything. "You know what? Sure," she said finally. "It's fine with me," he added, glancing at her with a new spark of curiosity. They lay down on separate massage tables, turned slightly away from each other. For a moment, silence filled the room until the massage therapists began working and the man groaned. "Wow," he muttered. "That's actually amazing." Faye laughed lightly. "You sound surprised." "I'm not usually this tense, been a long couple of weeks." "Same," she said. They were quiet again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. A few minutes later, his voice came again. "I'm Dorian Hale, by the way, Faye Pennington." "Faye," he repeated like he was testing it out. "Nice name." "Thanks. Yours sounds like it came out of a movie," he chuckled. "I'll take that." The massage ended, and they were both handed fluffy robes and led to a private spa lounge overlooking a koi pond. Apparently, the couple's treatment included herbal tea, snacks, and foot soaks. "I still can't believe they let us do this," Faye said, dipping her feet into the warm water. "I'm glad they did," Dorian said, watching her with more interest now. "You seem like you needed this." Faye looked at him. "You don't even know me." "True. But you've got that look." "What look?" "I carry the weight of the world in a $5 coffee kind of look," she laughed. "That sounds about right." They talked through the rest of the treatment. About jobs, Faye kept it vague, just saying she worked in a medical office. Dorian mentioned owning a company but didn't give details. She assumed he was some kind of consultant or manager. He looked like the expensive suit type. "You know," he said as they finished their tea, "I came here to clear my head. My business partner wants to sell the company and I'm not sure he's thinking straight." Faye looked at him. "And what do you want?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Lately, it feels like I'm building something I don't even want anymore," she nodded. "I get that. I've been thinking about quitting for months. I just haven't figured out what I'd do instead." He narrowed his eyes at her. "You should figure that out. You seem like the kind of person who could do anything." Faye blinked, caught off guard. "That's kind of you to say." "I meant it." They were quiet again, but it was different now. There was something in the air, an unspoken pull that hadn't been there before, Want to get lunch? He asked suddenly. There's a place nearby I love. She hesitated. Are you asking me out? I'm asking you to lunch, he said with a grin. After that, we'll see. Faye should have said no. She barely knew him, but something about him, his honesty, his calmness, the way he looked at her like she mattered, made her stomach flip. Okay, she said. Lunch sounds good. They left the spa together, walking side by side through the sunlit courtyard. Dorian handed his valet ticket to the attendant. Faye's jaw dropped when a sleek black Aston Martin pulled up a moment later. He turned to her casually. You coming? She blinked. That's your car? Yeah, are you? Rich, he laughed. I guess we skipped that part. I own Hale Tech. It's a software company. We do infrastructure for hospitals and private practices. Her mouth opened, then closed. You're a millionaire, he tilted his head. I thought we were past labels. Faye climbed into the car, still stunned. I thought you were just a stressed-out consultant. Technically, I am, he said as he slid behind the wheel, but I'm glad the massage gods paired us up. Faye looked at him, her heart thudding. So this was how it started. She'd booked a surprise spa treatment. And the millionaire she met there was already looking at her like he'd never seen anyone like her before. The restaurant Dorian brought her to wasn't just a lunch spot, it was an experience. Faye tried not to gape as they stepped into the rooftop garden of a building she hadn't even known existed. Glass walls opened to skyline views with low-hanging vines wrapped in delicate lights. The air smelled faintly of rosemary and citrus, and the host greeted Dorian by name before leading them to a secluded corner table with a panoramic view of the city's West End. I'm guessing this isn't on any delivery app, Faye said as she sat, her chair being pulled out by someone in a crisp uniform. Dorian leaned back, watching her with a quiet amusement. It's not exactly advertised. The chef likes to keep it exclusive. She looked around. Exclusive is one word for it. I feel like I should be wearing diamonds. You're fine as you are. She glanced down at her spa-issued sandals and simple sundress. That's a bold lie. Not a lie, he said, folding his hands on the table. You glow when you're relaxed. That's rare in this city. The compliment landed somewhere between unexpected and disarming. Do you say that to all your accidental spa dates? He chuckled, but didn't answer. A waiter appeared with a tray of chilled melon soup and a wine list so thick it needed its own table stand. Faye raised an eyebrow as Dorian waved off the menu entirely. You always order without looking. I trust their choices. You'll like what they bring. She tilted her head. You sound very sure of what I like. I'm learning. Faye leaned back in her chair slightly, narrowing her eyes. All right, since we're being bold, here's a question. Why were you really at the spa? He didn't look surprised. Because I was on the verge of throwing my CFO out a window. Therapy would have been cheaper. Not when you own the window, she laughed before catching herself. Okay, fair. But seriously, you said something earlier. About building something you're not even sure you want anymore. Is that really about your partner, or is it about you? Dorian's expression shifted, not closed off, just thoughtful. I used to think success would feel like freedom. But lately, it's just another kind of trap, more polished, more expensive, still a trap. Faye set down her spoon. So what would you do if you weren't running Hale Tech? I used to paint, he said suddenly, like it surprised him to remember. I studied art for 2 years before switching to business. My father called it a hobby, not a future, and you listened. I was 19 and stupid. Faye studied him. You don't seem stupid now. He gave a small nod. That's debatable. The food arrived, a series of small plates, each more elaborate than the last. Faye tasted a tomato sorbet paired with charred fig and let out a quiet sound of disbelief. I think this just rewired my entire palate. Good, Dorian said. You deserve to eat things that make you forget your own name. She paused. You say things like that with a straight face. Is that a rich guy thing? No, it's a man seeing a woman he's curious about thing. Faye's breath caught. She looked away briefly, grounding herself by focusing on her water glass. Curious, huh? Very. She met his gaze again. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. They lingered over dessert, something involving lavender mousse and candied ginger, and by the time they stood to leave, the sun was dipping low, casting the city in a warm golden hue. Outside, Dorian paused before unlocking the car. "Look, I know we just met and this was supposed to be a spa day, not a date, but I don't want this to end here." Faye crossed her arms. "You're not usually this impulsive, are you?" He shook his head. "No, but something about you makes me want to be." She considered him for a long moment. "I don't do flings, and I definitely don't do complicated." "Neither do I," he said, "but maybe this doesn't have to be either." Before she could answer, her phone rang from inside her small bag. She glanced at the screen. "I have to go," she said. "Work stuff. It's Sunday." She gave a half smile. "My boss doesn't believe in weekends." Dorian hesitated, then reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and handed her a business card. Unlike most, it had no title, no company, just a number and his name in italic print. "Call me," he said. "Or don't, but if you do, I'll take you somewhere even better." Faye took the card, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second. "You're assuming I'll be impressed. I'm hoping you'll be curious." She slid the card into her bag. "We'll see." Dorian opened the door for her but didn't press further. As she turned to hail a cab from the edge of the curb, she glanced back once. He was still watching her. That night, after microwaving leftover stir-fry and tossing her spa bag into a corner, Faye sat on her couch, staring at the card. She didn't call. Not yet. But she didn't throw it away either. 3 days passed before Faye called him. Not because she was playing games, but because she needed time to think, really think. About what it meant to step into a world that didn't speak her language. About a man she barely knew, who looked at her like she was already part of something bigger than herself. She chose a quiet moment after her shift ended and the last patient had left the office. The cleaning staff had come and gone. The floor still smelled faintly of antiseptic. Dorian answered on the second ring. "I was beginning to think you weren't going to call," he said, his voice low and even. "I almost didn't," she replied. "Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure if I should." "And now, I'm still not sure," she admitted. "Where are you right now?" "Break room." "Sitting on a stool that squeaks every time I breathe." "Come outside." "What?" "I'm parked across the street." She stood instantly, pushing past the swinging door into the empty reception area. Through the glass, she spotted the sleek silhouette of his car idling beneath the streetlight, a driver standing beside it. "You planned this," she said, stepping outside and crossing the street. "I hoped for it," he corrected. The driver opened the rear door with a respectful nod, and Faye hesitated only a second before climbing in. Dorian was already inside, dressed in a dark jacket and open-collared shirt that looked effortless but tailored. "You've been watching my office." He shook his head. "I wasn't sure you'd call, but I remembered you said your shift ended around this time. I took a chance." She narrowed her eyes. "You don't even know where I work." I asked around. "You stalked me." "I had someone look up your name. It's less dramatic than it sounds." "I just needed to know if I'd imagined what I felt." She folded her arms. "And did you?" "No, you're even more real than I remembered." She glanced at the driver in the front seat. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere quiet." The car pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic as the city lights blinked past the windows like stars in fast motion. They didn't speak again until the car rolled to a stop in front of a discreet building without signage, tucked between a florist and a bookstore. Dorian led her through a narrow alley and into a private courtyard filled with low lanterns, stone benches, and a single piano beneath a glass awning. "I bought the building last year," he said, unlocking a door with a thumbprint scanner. "It used to be a theater. Now it's just mine." Faye stepped inside and stared. The space had been transformed into a living gallery. Canvases leaned against the walls, some half-finished, others covered with bold strokes of color and shadow. A single easel stood near the window, paint still wet on the brush beside it. "You painted these," she said, her voice hushed. He nodded. "I haven't shown anyone." "Not in years." "Why show me?" "Because you asked what I'd do if I wasn't running Hale Tech. This is the answer. She moved closer to a canvas that depicted a woman standing alone in a subway station, her face partially obscured by the blur of a passing train. Faye stared at it for a long time. "That's loneliness," she said quietly. "It's choice," he replied. "She's waiting for something or someone." Faye turned to him. "You're not what I expected either." "I don't want to be." They stood in the silence of the studio, surrounded by color and unfinished thoughts. "So what happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you." She looked away. "I don't belong in this world. The spa, the rooftop restaurant, your perfect life, none of it fits me. You fit exactly where you decide to stand. I'm not trying to be someone else." "I don't want you to be," Faye exhaled, staring at the canvas again. "This woman in the painting. She's not sure if the train's coming for her or if it already passed. Then she needs to decide whether to wait or chase it." She turned to him. "Is this what you're like with everyone? Always this intense?" "No," he said, "only with you." She didn't know what to say to that. He walked to the piano, lifted the lid, and played a few soft notes. Nothing practiced, just a wandering melody that lingered in the air like a breath that hadn't yet been released. "I don't need you to be impressed," he said, his voice quiet. "I just need you to be honest with me." Faye sat down beside him on the bench, her knees brushing his. "I'm terrified. Of me, of what this could be." He didn't touch her, didn't lean in, just looked at her with eyes that didn't ask for anything but truth. Her voice came out softer than she meant. "I've never had something that felt like it could break me if I wasn't careful. Neither have I." They stayed like that, side by side, the piano's last note fading into silence. Outside, the city moved on without them. But in that studio, surrounded by forgotten dreams and rediscovered passions, something took root and refused to be ignored. A beginning neither of them had planned, but both of them were already falling into. The invitation came 2 days later, hand-delivered in a navy envelope, thick as velvet and sealed with a gold-embossed H. Faye found it tucked between the cracks of her apartment mailbox, the familiar handwriting on the front making her pulse jump. Inside, a single card. Black tie. "I'll send a car, say yes." No name, no explanation, but she knew. She stared at it for a full hour before making the call that terrified her more than anything had in weeks. "I need a dress," she told her neighbor Talia, who worked wardrobe for a local theater company and owed her 3 favors. "Something that says I belong in a room where people order wine they can't pronounce." The night of the event, as she stepped out of the car that arrived promptly at 7, Faye felt like she was walking into a dream she wasn't sure she'd wake from. The building was a historic museum, closed to the public that evening for a private gala. The entrance glowed with soft amber lights, and a red carpet led to the grand staircase. Her heels clicked against the stone steps as she ascended, heart pounding in her ears. The moment she stepped through the doors, she saw him. Dorian stood near the central fountain, dressed in a deep charcoal suit and talking to a man in a tuxedo who looked like he'd never been told no in his life. But the second Dorian caught sight of her, he stopped mid-sentence. He didn't say a word as he walked across the room. "You came," he said, voice low but steady. "I didn't have to climb through a window, so that helped." He studied her. "You look like you've been here your whole life. Don't lie to me in public. I might start believing you." "I don't say things I don't mean." She glanced around. "What is this, anyway?" "A fundraiser for a pediatric tech initiative. Hale Tech sponsors it every year, but this time I wanted to be here, with you." She looked up at him. "You brought me to a charity gala?" "I wanted you to see my world, the parts that matter." Before Faye could respond, a photographer passed by and paused. "Would you mind?" Dorian nodded once, then turned to Faye with a question in his eyes. She gave a small nod, and he placed his hand gently at her waist. The flash blinked once, capturing them in a frame she knew would haunt her if this all disappeared tomorrow. They moved through the evening together like a current pulling them forward. Dorian introduced her only by name, never by title or label. He listened when she spoke to guests, never interrupting, never correcting. It felt less like being on display and more like being anchored in a storm she didn't know she'd been caught in. Later, as the crowd thinned and the string quartet packed up their instruments, Faye found herself standing alone beside a glass case of antique surgical tools, not exactly her idea of a romantic backdrop. Dorian appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He handed her one. "I need to tell you something," he said. She turned to him. "That doesn't sound terrifying at all." He ignored the jab. "My partner accepted a buyout offer. He's stepping away from the company." Faye blinked. "What does that mean for you?" "I bought him out." "You what?" "I didn't want to lose what I built. But more than that, I didn't want to keep building it the way we were, so I'm restructuring. Smaller, leaner, more focused on what we started for." She stared at him. "You made that decision in a week. I've been headed there for a while. You just helped me admit it." She shook her head. "I didn't do anything. You reminded me what it feels like to want something for no reason other than it makes you feel alive." Faye looked away. "I'm not used to being someone's reason for change. You're not the reason. You're the mirror. You showed me what I was hiding from." She took a sip of champagne, needing the distraction. "And what are you hoping happens next?" "I want you to come with me." She turned to him slowly. "To where?" "I'm opening a satellite office in Florence, just 2 months. I'll be painting again between meetings, living slower. I want you there. I can't just vanish to Italy." "Why not? I have bills, a job. A life. You have a choice. You're asking me to leave everything." "I'm asking you to step into something new." She hesitated. "And after the 2 months, we come home, together or we don't, but we find out." Faye stared at him, her breath catching. "You really believe this could work?" "I do." He paused. "But if it scares you too much, I'll stay. I'll build whatever life you want, wherever you are, as long as it's with you." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned and walked toward the fountain in the center of the room. Its water glowed under soft lights, casting ripples against the marble floor. She stared into it, remembering the woman in his painting, the one standing alone, not sure if she'd missed her train. "I've waited a long time to feel like I had a choice," she said finally. Dorian joined her. "And now," she looked up at him. "Now I feel like I'm already on the train." He reached for her hand. "Then let's see where it goes." She nodded, eyes shining with something new, something certain. They left the gala hand in hand, no flashbulbs, no farewells. Just 2 people stepping into the night, not with answers, but with a promise. A week later, she boarded the plane beside him. No hesitation. No script. Just a woman who booked a spa treatment on a whim, and the man who saw her for exactly who she was and refused to let her go. Rain threaded through the narrow streets of Florence, catching the lantern light and pooling in the cobblestones. Faye stood in the open archway of the studio apartment, barefoot on cool tile, her arms crossed as she watched Dorian paint in the next room. He hadn't noticed her, yet his brush moved with quiet precision, blending color into shadow on an oversized canvas propped against the far wall. She stepped forward slowly. "You always lose time when you're painting." He didn't stop, but his voice found her. "It's the only place I don't have to be anyone else." She moved beside him, studying the piece in progress. The lines were bold but unfinished, a woman walking through a sunlit corridor, her face half turned toward something unseen. "Is that me?" His hand stilled. "It started as you. But now I think it's who you were before all this." Faye tilted her head. "She's going somewhere. She doesn't know where yet." She looked up at him. "I think she does." They hadn't talked much about what came next. The Florence trip had always had an expiration date, but neither one of them had said the words aloud. 2 weeks had passed quickly. Too quickly. But beneath the dinners and sun-drenched mornings and quiet nights wrapped in each other's arms, time had taken on a different shape. Faye walked to the window, the scent of wet stone and lemon trees drifting in through the open shutters. "You haven't asked me if I want to go back." Dorian set the brush down, wiping his hands on a cloth before joining her. "Because I'm afraid of the answer." She turned. "What if the answer isn't no?" His gaze searched hers. "Then I'd ask you to stay, not just here with me." Faye leaned back against the window frame. "I've been thinking about what I want, not just what I'm running from. And I don't want to go back to a life where I'm invisible. I don't want to keep pretending I'm content to stay small, a pause, then a confession. I've started writing again, his brow lifted. Writing, it started with a journal, then turned into essays. I don't know what it'll be yet, but it's mine. And for the first time, it feels like I'm creating something that says who I am. Dorian stepped closer. You're not invisible to me, Faye, you never were, she exhaled. That's why I'm not afraid anymore, not of this. Not of us. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small, aged envelope. I've been carrying this for days, he said, handing it to her. She opened it, unfolding the single sheet inside. It was a deed to a property on the edge of the city. A small villa surrounded by olive trees, marked with her name in clean, official print. Her breath caught. What is this? A place that's ours, if you want it. A home, a writing space, a studio, whatever you need it to be. Her fingers trembled. You bought a house. I bought a future. With you, Dorian, he took her hands. You don't have to say yes right now, but I need you to know I'm not going anywhere. If Florence isn't where you want to stay, we'll go somewhere else. I'll follow you anywhere. She looked down at their joined hands, then back up. I don't want you to follow me. His face fell slightly until she added, I want us to lead something together wherever we go. His expression changed, then something open, something unguarded. You mean it, he said. She nodded. I'm not walking away from this. From you. He pulled her in, his arms wrapping around her as if he could anchor the moment in place, and when he kissed her, it wasn't tentative or questioning, it was a promise. Quiet and certain and full of everything they hadn't said yet. Outside, the rain slowed to a mist. The lights of the city shimmered beneath the clouds, golden and soft. Later that night, they danced barefoot in the kitchen to an old record playing from a speaker she didn't remember packing. He twirled her once, then twice, before catching her against his chest. You're going to marry me, he said, not as a question. She looked up at him, eyes alight. Eventually, soon, she laughed. Eventually is soon. They moved through the weeks like they had always been part of each other's rhythm. Faye set up a writing corner near the window, and Dorian built a studio in the back of the villa. They hosted dinners for the neighbors, learned enough Italian to argue with the baker, and found themselves walking the same cobbled roads at night, hand in hand, like old souls who had somehow found each other again. And when the time came when the leaves turned gold, and the air shifted with autumn, he took her to the same rooftop where they'd once eaten lavender mousse and watched the city lights flicker. There were no crowds this time. Just a table for two, a bottle of wine, and a velvet box resting between dessert forks. Faye opened it slowly, her breath catching at the sight of a delicate gold band set with a single sapphire. It's not about the stone, he said. It's about what it means. She looked up at him, her voice thick. What does it mean? That I found the one thing I never knew I was missing, and I'm never letting go. Her answer was a whisper. Yes. They didn't need a wedding with chandeliers and orchestras. Instead, they stood beneath a canopy of olive trees, surrounded by a circle of 8 local friends, and kissed under a sky the color of honey and dust. She wore a linen dress. He wore a shirt rolled at the sleeves. They danced in the dirt, barefoot and laughing, the sound of their joy echoing through the hills. And when they returned to the villa that night, moonlight filtering through the windows, Faye curled into his side and whispered, I feel like I finally stepped into my own life. Dorian kissed her temple. You didn't step into it, you created it, and she had, a life where she wasn't small. A love she hadn't dared to dream of. A home that had started with a spa appointment and become a forever she had chosen. They fell asleep wrapped in each other, the future wide and unwritten but finally, unquestionably, theirs.